let's talk about threads. I don't want to cater to the algorithm. I want to be driven by God. The funny thing is God often does this where you're at the point of surrender. I was just like, God, I don't need to do a video or anything on threads. I kid you not, I woke up with clarity about this video, like what to talk about, what the problems in society were, what the problem with social media is, the pros and the cons and everything. And I was like, that's strange. I just want to preface with that context because I feel like without that, this video and what I'm talking about might seem a little bit contradictory, but I genuinely want to restate that I did not want to do a topic just for the sake of doing the topic. Basically, I just felt so compelled to talk about this because what just really burdens my heart personally is just seeing people just lost. They don't know. They kind of just go with the flow of like where the world is going, what culture's saying. And I really firmly believe God has put a conviction on my heart to use the thoughts and revelations that he gives me and steward it to help whoever's on the other side of this to navigate cultural tensions and things that we can so easily be swept up in, but God wants us to do it differently. And not just do it differently, but like approach it, view it, think about things differently. So Threads came out last week at the time of recording this video. I will just be honest, I felt anxious, like a mix of, oh cool, what's this new app? I'm curious, I'm excited, but I also felt anxious because I was like, another social media app, like there's so many already that I can barely handle. I don't love being on social media. Like I like using it for good, but I prefer to live my life off screen and not on screen. And I also saw everybody saying the same thing on my feed of like, oh my gosh, there's so many apps to take care of now. And that was interesting because I went to bed that night, intrigued by this app, very curious about where it would end up, but I also felt there's something here to lean into that I was processing myself what to think about this and how to go through all these feelings and emotions with God. I felt like it was almost like a gold rush feeling of there's like this new territory, there's like potential gold, and everyone's just like rushing, like first dibs, who's gonna get the most engagement, who's gonna beat the algorithm, who's gonna be like number one before everybody else. We're early adopters, so we have a leg up, and it just created this sense of anxiety of like you need to be the first to get on top. And I just repented. I was like, God, I know this is not of you, this is not the right lens to be thinking about it, and social media does not dictate our success or our future or our relevance or our worth or anything, so I was just asking God to help me root myself in him as my firm foundation and not social media engagement metrics, all that, because I don't want to be like not on social media. Like I actually do have this heart of utilizing social media again for good, but I want to make sure I'm guarding my heart against how the enemy is trying to like sow lies and like twist it, like distort it away from God. And so I'm just going to share some thoughts and observations about social media in general and how Threads kind of magnified and amplified those things, especially within the next week. And I think in the weeks and months to come, we'll see this as well. And I didn't think I would actually get to this point, but I feel like God gave me these inspiration, these ideas, and I'm happy to share it on here because I don't feel like anyone's gonna like steal, or maybe if you steal it, then whatever. I don't feel like I'm called to build a social media app, but yeah, just like what could a more ideal social media app look like if it's not Threads? And I'll get to that. So the first part is when it comes to social media and what Threads is showing us about social media and culture and human nature and society. So if you just zoom out and kind of look at the grand scheme of things, social media undeniably has really shaped and changed not just our society, economy, businesses, but like how we function and think as human beings. A lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people start to think in the lens of like living their lives almost for like an audience. Like how can I use these things to leverage, like to build an audience or engage people or get more likes? How can I capture my life in a way that looks beautiful? And it's very subconscious. It's not even like an intentional way of thinking of, oh, I realize I'm doing this. It's like it just seeps into how we function just based on the structure and how the system of social media is built. When I was working at Google and I worked with many different teams and engineers and product managers and all of that, there was very little talk, if ever, about the end user's like holistic well-being. Almost all the talk was focused on the bottom line, the profit, the revenue, and if not the revenue, then the clicks, impressions, signups, acquisitions, and upselling people. It was just like, it's all about the business. You can watch this documentary on Netflix. It's called The Social Dilemma, and it talks about this from the perspective of the people who built built these apps like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all that. And they talk about how they don't even want their kids on these apps. Like I feel very similarly, which brings me to Threads. So Threads was made to be different from Twitter in a lot of ways. You know, it's claiming that it has a more positive vibe, and people are saying this about it, and why it's like better is there's no ads, there's no business features, it's less spammy, so we feel more connected with people, kind of like Twitter back in the day, I guess. But I also still see a lot of problems, and I think one of the main ones, so this is kind of what God put into my head when I woke up the other day, was I just got transported back to a flashback when I was in college. And I think many people can relate to this, being in classes or discussions, seminars, or whatever, and the whole idea of participation points just irked the heck out of me, because there were kids in those classes who just participated for the sake of participation points. Like the things that they were saying, you could obviously tell they didn't do their homework, they didn't do their reading, they have nothing of value to say, they're just talking for the sake of talking. It created this dynamic that was kind of weird of like, okay, I know what you're up to and you're just pulling things out of your butt, but at the same time now I feel pressured to do the same thing because I need my participation points too. If those few students in that class are taking up all participation time, I need to step it up too, so that I don't look like I'm not talking at all. So it's kind of like this pressure of you comparing yourself to everybody else participating and feeling that pressure of like, I need to up my level, my percentage of talking because everybody else is. But then that creates this thought, you know, going back to looking at your life through the lens of how can this be used for social media or engagement, it creates this thinking like I need to say something or engage or post just for the sake of doing it and being relevant and present in that area. Already brands and influencers and celebrities basically like baiting for engagement, like giveaways of like, I'll give thousands of dollars to the first whatever 1,000 followers. And you know, it's not bad to do giveaways and get engagement like that, but it just disheartened me because I was like, wow, some things just don't change. You know, we're on this new app, there's a new opportunity to recreate what social media could look like, and we're just seeing similar trends of engaging for the sake of engaging, asking meaningless questions for the sake of people answering back. And even though, yes, I do agree it is more positive relative to Twitter, you still get a lot of fake engagement for the sake of engagement. It's just not authentic. And I feel like people can even fake their authenticity and not even realize they're faking it. It's so important just to really be honest and self-evaluate, self-reflect on like, what am I feeling right now? Where is this all coming from? Because if it's coming out of this subconscious pressure, it's actually better to lean into that and ask God to help you operate out of a healthier space. And yeah, I feel like there's already enough content out there about mental health and, you know, that relationship with social media, but I think it'd be really interesting to hone in especially on the effect of the algorithm, because back when, you know, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, they all just started, there was just chronological feeds. I remember when the algorithm first came out, it was like novel. It was like, whoa, now like things are catered to me. I can see more posts that I like. And it just basically got people even more addicted to using it because they were seeing things that were reconfirming their own beliefs and identity and what they wanted to tell people like they were about. At the end of the day, it's an attention economy. The people behind all these products, designing them, building them, they're not thinking about the person, the user's soul and the user's holistic well-being. They're thinking about how do we get this person to use this app more and gamify it so it's engaging and get their attention so that ultimately it drives their overall business revenue. And so if we as the end user are not cognizant of that, we just fall right into that trap and we just scroll our lives away, and it adds even more screen time, I feel, because I think people are still kind of like using Instagram, TikTok, all these other apps, and now you add Threads into the addition. It's just another app taking up even more time, attention, and not just physical like time, but also just mental energy, emotional energy. And unfortunately, I was personally really sad to see the first signs of like unhealthy conversations and fighting basically on Threads between these other Christians or so-called Christians who were attacking these pastors and authors. And I was like, okay, like I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I'm a pretty hopeful person, but all these things reconfirmed to me that Threads is not the answer to our human sinful nature. But I do think it really makes a huge difference if someone were to build an app for the person, end user's true well-being rather than what would benefit the business overall and the bottom line. And this brings me to talk about what that could look like hypothetically. Disclaimer, I was a product marketing manager. I worked with product managers and engineers, but I myself am not in the technical sphere, so I don't know how realistic all this would be. But I just wanted to share in case there is a product manager or someone out there who has this yearning as well. And yeah, I just, if anything, I just want this to be food for thought for people about the way that we approach technology and innovation and building things. And God even gave me like a term to use for this that just popped into my head as I was writing all this down, and it was social media, about, actually thinking about the person's soul and their spiritual and overall well-being, and making social media more of an enhancement to life rather than so addictive and making the bottom line the goal, the revenue the goal, but actually thinking about what's actually best for the person, which ironically could be people getting off the app and people using it just occasionally, but at least people would have a more healthy relationship with it so that they're not using it to fill their needs, but it's more using it because it's genuine and authentic and life-giving. So yeah, don't take this too seriously. I'm just throwing this out there just because I don't like to be someone who gripes and complains and criticizes. I like to be someone who notices problems and then offers solutions. And funny enough, I didn't think we would get to this point because I'm like, it's not possible to have the perfect social media app. But these again are just ideas for food for thought. So the first thing is to bring back the chronological feed. The algorithm didn't favor people based on their engagement. It wasn't a popularity contest. Like everyone truly had an equal voice in that way of having an equal chance of being seen. The downside of that obviously is, first of all, you won't have as many posts that you could like and see and are more popular. You might very well see one post and then 5 posts that you're like, those are okay. But then that's like real life. Real life is not everybody agreeing with you, and that's just an unhealthy bubble, an echo chamber that you're living in. People will disagree, will be weird, will make you uncomfortable, and it just teaches you, I feel like, to better deal with real life and be a more loving, accepting, empathetic person with people who disagree with you, rather than I just want to see things that are popular or reaffirm and align with my current existing viewpoints. And yeah, on the developer side, the obvious sacrifice is you aren't hooking people in as easily to be on their phones and using it, for a long time. But I feel like there's something just beautiful about that concept of creating an app that is incentivizing people to get off the app too, and not just mindlessly and endlessly scrolling. The other thing with the chronological feed that would be really revolutionary is that it would basically take away an incentive to create popular hype or traffic to your post, engagement to your post just for the sake of that, because basically the measurements don't really matter anymore in terms of how many people see and discover you. There could be a way to still do that in a more positive, more healthy way, and I'll talk about that in my third point. I think that would be the big change in shifting how people post things. Instead of just posting things that are empty and meaningless for the sake of just getting traction, it would actually motivate people differently. And I think we need to think about that when we build anything, is what is this teaching people about what motivates and incentivizes and drives them? Because ultimately how we design things and the systems and structures and incentivization that's set up within those is literally discipling people about how to think, how to behave, and even emotionally and spiritually affecting them too. Okay, the second thing is using AI to rethink the way we suggest accounts to follow. For example, right now on all of these social media apps, they'll suggest to you what you'll like, especially on YouTube. That is a dangerous trap on YouTube because it suggests really interesting videos and you're like, I can't help but click. And guys, echo chambers are real. I used to manage different social media accounts from brands to pastors to other people who are different from me, and every feed was different. I was like, okay, this is why, about when things were going on in the world, the discussions and the conversations I was seeing on all of these different accounts were so different. And I was like, this just reinforces that we do live in an echo chamber when we assume that everything we're seeing on social media is reflective of the real world when it's not. And so with all that said, how helpful and how cool could it be to actually have not just accounts like you section, but to actually have suggestions that are alternate perspectives or different opinions to encourage you to actually check out and learn from and be open-minded to people who might be different from you based on what you post and what you like. And then you might be asking, won't that just encourage more trolls and haters and online arguing because of human nature, us being prideful and wanting to be right and not understanding people who disagree with us? And yeah, I can totally see that, which is what brings me to the third point. And this is the most, I think, out there idea and very novel, a bit Black Mirror-y. Like it reminds me of that one episode, but maybe this is a more redeemed version. But we already have, a lot of social media tools that do social listening. And basically, I used to do this in brand marketing at Google, is use these tools to gauge the sentiment about something that's being talked about. So you can look up certain hashtags or even an account and see, based on what they're talking about, the words that they use, and how they engage on that platform, what's their overall sentiment. And so I was thinking, if we want to encourage people on a social media app to actually engage in a healthy, respectful way of adding value and giving life and hope and encouragement, but also not being toxically positive either for the sake of positivity, but even like just engage in respectful debates and conversations, which is totally fine. Like it's actually really healthy and really good to have conversations with people who have different views as you, but just do it in a healthy way. I feel like the ideal scenario would be to have this sentiment rating, almost like, again, using AI to detect like not just the words that you're using, but like the way you're saying, like your tone, your approach, and is this person, maybe they're disagreeing but being respectful about it versus like hating on someone. And on the flip side, you don't want to reward someone who maybe they're using a ton of exclamation points, which could seem positive, but it's actually like hateful speech. And this sentiment rating could maybe be available to be shown on your profile, but not like prominently displayed. That way it's not like a badge, or it's not like as incentivizing, people cheating the system and gaming it and being inauthentic just for the sentiment rating. Of course, you can never prevent that entirely, I feel. But I feel like in that way, it's almost a bit like how Instagram allows you to hide likes now. It's just less obvious. It's just more effort for people to look at the likes, and that way they're not as triggered if it is a trigger for them in terms of measuring themselves by their likes. And so similar to the sentiment rating, it would be available, but it wouldn't be in your face like this is the goal, this is what you need to measure yourself by. But by being there and kind of like keeping yourself accountable in a way, it keeps you in check. If it fell maybe below a 3 or like it's getting to a 2, like the app would start giving you notifications and tips about how to engage in public discourse more respectfully, and like, oh, we noticed you said this in a very demeaning way, and this could be a better way to phrase it. And then use like an AI bot to be like, do you have any questions? Like, what do you think? And it's basically like a coach kind of training you to engage with other people on the app in a more healthy way. Of course, I feel like that, AI bot, AI coach would have to be honed in really, really well, because AI by itself without human influence doesn't really know what's empathetic or respectful, and it can get things wrong sometimes. So I feel like there would also need to be a way to contest it and talk to someone on a support line, and then have those people on the support line be really emotionally healthy and just have high EQ to know not just how to engage with the app in a healthy way, but how to coach people and help people process through how to do that themselves. People in general, I feel like, don't bash people just for the sake of it. This is more of like a corrective measure for people who really need that kind of training. But it's not just teaching them skills for the app, it's also teaching them how to do that in real life. And then for the next period, whether it's like 20 days or 20 posts or whatever, if you're consistently improving in terms of your sentiments, then you can continue to raise your rating. So I feel like in that way, it doesn't paralyze people about like, oh, I need to post everything perfectly and be a perfect person, because it's not possible. There should be enough wiggle room and just grace to give like, oh, this is 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. Okay, after 3 strikes, you're gonna go down like 0.2, But if you show consistent improvement, just like you would, in real life, if you're coaching or training, teaching someone to get better, it's doable and actually accessible to continue to raise your rating. And that really comes from just knowing that God is a God of second chances. And so no one is ever past redemption. So just always giving people the chance to learn and continue to grow and get better, and not be like canceled because they, got a 0 out of 5 rating on sentiment rating on this thing. And yeah, those are just some ideas and fun food for thought I wanted to share, just to provoke some thoughts, because it's so easy for us to nitpick and criticize things that we see that we feel are wrong in the world. But it's kind of fun to also just dream and have a vision with God and let him inspire you with ideas of like, what could the redeemed version look like, and have conversations like this, because who knows who could be watching this, and maybe you do have a passion for this, and you do have the skill set and you want to actually make that. I would be personally really honored that this inspired you and influenced you. And I don't know, I guess I just assume like in the very, very small chance that someone actually takes this idea, they would be the kind of person, if you're caring about people's souls, that you would also be a decent enough person to credit like this idea came from a very small channel on YouTube. The most important takeaway that's going to apply to majority of people people watching this who are not app builders or whatever is on the end user side of these apps to be really cognizant and mindful of like, what is this app doing to my soul? What narratives am I believing? What feelings am I feeling? And how can I not let the algorithm or this app control me and like perpetuate or enable my unhealthy patterns internally and externally? And to really bring all of these things to God, to ask Him to help you to parse through it and process it, and ultimately not root your identity or your worth in anything other than Him. I'm just genuinely curious, like, what you guys think about Threads and social media and just any other reflections and takeaways that this video provokes in you. I would love to hear in the comments. We just don't want to be living our lives passively as consumers who just have no idea what these things are doing to us. We want to be mindful and proactive about designing and cultivating our lives in a way that's healthy to our souls. And if you're interested in more conversations like this, feel free to tune into me and my husband's podcast that we post every week on this channel. And if you subscribe, that's how you'll get notified. See you around.